My wife was dying and I called my son Derek. My only son. I'm busy, Dad. 4 words. 9:47 p.m. My wife was in the ICU at Centaur RMH Medical Center in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Room 412. Bed A, ventilator. Central line in her right subclavian vein. A Swan-Ganz catheter monitoring the pressure inside her heart. Sepsis, a systemic infection that was shutting her organs down one at a time, the way a building loses power floor by floor. Derek, your mother is in the ICU. It's serious. The doctor said the next 12 hours are critical. I need you here. Dad, I'm at a dinner. A work thing? It's important. I can't just leave. Your mother might not make it through the night. A pause. I could hear restaurant noise. Glasses louder. The particular acoustics of a place where people are enjoying themselves. I'm busy, Dad. I'll come in the morning. He didn't come in the morning. Not because he forgot. Because by morning, he found out what the hospital chaplain told me at 6 a.m., that my wife had changed her will 3 weeks before the sepsis. And what she'd done with the $3 million estate made. I'm busy? The most expensive 4 words Derek ever said. Before we go any further, thank you for being here. If those 4 words already made your blood move, take a second and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It truly helps this channel reach more people. And a gentle reminder, while this story carries real emotions and real lessons, some names, details, and events have been fictionalized for narrative and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real individuals is coincidental. Stay with me. Because what Derek did the next morning is worse than what he said that night. My name is Arthur Beckett. I'm 67 years old. I'm a retired high school woodshop teacher from Harrisonburg, Virginia, 34 years at Turner Ashby High School, teaching teenagers how to use a table saw without losing a finger and how to measure twice because you only get to cut once. I made $58,000 my last year. My pension is $42,000 in a year. I drive a 2017 Ford F-150 with 114,000 miles. I am not a wealthy man by any definition. My wife, Margaret, was the wealth. Not because she earned more than me, she didn't. Margaret was a registered nurse. She worked at Centaur RMH for 28 years, specializing in cardiac care. Her salary peaked at $72,000. But Margaret understood money the way she understood vital signs, not as numbers on a screen, but as indicators of health. She watched them. She tracked them. She responded when they changed. Every month, for 35 years. She maxed her 401 through Centaur's retirement plan, contributing the IRS annual limit, $23,000 in 2024 for employees over 50. Thanks to the catch-up contribution provision under the Internal Revenue Code Section 414. She invested in a 3-fund portfolio, a total stock market index, a total international index, and a total bond index, rebalanced annually. With the discipline of a woman who treated her retirement accounts the way she treated her patients with consistent, methodical, long-term care. By 2025, Margaret's retirement accounts totaled $4 million. Our house, a 4-bedroom colonial on Garber's Church Road bought in 1994 for $142,000, was worth $480,000, fully paid off. My pension and Social Security would provide $64,000 annually. Margaret's life insurance, a $400,000 term policy through Centaur's group plan, would pay upon her death. Total estate approximately $3 million, built by a nurse and a woodshop teacher over 35 years of marriage. Dollar by dollar. Paycheck by paycheck. The kind of wealth that doesn't arrive in a lottery or an inheritance. The kind that grows like a tree, slowly and visibly, and only visible when someone finally looks up and notices how tall it's gotten. Derek never looked up. Let me tell you about my son. Because the man who said, "I'm busy, Dad," at 9:47 p.m. while his mother was on a ventilator is not the boy I remember raising. Derek was born in 1990. Only child. Margaret and I tried for more. 2 miscarriages, one in 1993, one in 1995, both in the second trimester, both devastating in the particular way that lost pregnancies are devastating: grief without a funeral, mourning without a body. Sadness that society doesn't know how to hold because there's no casket to carry. Derek was our miracle and our everything. We poured ourselves into him, not financially, though we did that too, but emotionally. He was the center. Every decision we made from 1990 forward was filtered through the question, is this good for Derek? He was a good kid. Smart. Charming in the effortless way that only children are charming, because they've had the undivided attention of 2 adults their entire lives, and they know how to work a room by the time they're 6. He played baseball. I coached his little league team for 4 years. He played guitar. Margaret drove him to lessons every Tuesday for 3 years. He made honor roll. He got into James Madison University. He graduated in 2012 with a degree in business administration. After college, Derek moved to Charlottesville, an hour from Harrisonburg, close enough to visit, far enough to feel independent. He got a job at a commercial real estate firm, leasing agent, then associate broker, then broker. By 2020, he was earning $115,000. By 2024, he was earning $160,000. He drove a Lexus. He wore tailored suits. He lived in a townhouse in Crozet that cost $520,000, finance not paid off with a mortgage of $3,800 a month. He was successful. And success, in Derek's case, came with a side effect that I didn't recognize until it was too late. He began to believe that success made him important and importance made everyone else less so. It started small. Missed phone calls. Sunday calls that Margaret and I had maintained with Derek since he left for college every Sunday 6 p.m. without fail began to go unanswered. Not every week, but enough. 1 missed call became 2. 2 became 3. By 2023, Derek was answering maybe twice a month. Visits declined in parallel. Derek came home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. That was it. No birthday visits. No random weekends. No, I was in the area. Stops. Margaret noticed first. She always noticed first. And she tracked it the way she tracked everything in a notebook. A small composition book that she kept in her nightstand. She didn't call it a log or a journal. She called it Derek's ledger. I didn't know about the ledger until after the ICU, but Margaret had been keeping it for 2 years. Every missed call dated. Every declined visit noted. Every excuse. Work dinner. Client meeting. I'm traveling. I'll come next weekend. Written down with the time and context. The ledger showed a pattern that was unmistakable when you saw it all at once. In 2023, Derek visited 4 times. In 2024, he visited twice, Thanksgiving and Christmas, both for less than 24 hours. He called 11 times in all of 2024, 11 calls in 365 days, for a son who lived 1 hour away. But the ledger also showed something else. It showed the calls Derek did make and what he called about. Because out of those 11 calls in 2024, 7 of them included a request for money, 1,000 in March for a tax issue, 5,000 in June for a down payment on an investment property that fell through, 12,000 in September for a cash flow gap at the firm, to 15,000 in November, the Thanksgiving visit, the one where he stayed for 19 hours and left with a check. Total requested in 2020 40,000. Total received a 40,000. Because we gave him everything he asked for. Because he was our only son. Because Margaret said every time, he needs help, Arthur. That's what parents do. But Margaret also wrote in the ledger, next to the 15,000 entry in November, this is the last one. He's not struggling. He's harvesting. Harvesting. Margaret's word. The word a cardiac nurse uses when a body is taking resources from organs that need them and redirecting them to systems that don't. Derek was harvesting us, extracting money while contributing nothing. No visits. No care. No presents. Just invoices dressed as phone calls. The 40,000 was never repaid. Derek never mentioned repayment. We never asked. Fathers don't invoice their children. But Margaret, in the ledger, in the quiet accountability of a composition notebook, kept the receipts. Margaret was admitted to Centaur RMH on January 3, 2025. She'd been fighting a urinary tract infection that her primary care doctor had treated with a standard course of ciprofloxacin, a fluoroquinolone antibiotic commonly prescribed for UTIs. The infection didn't respond. It escalated. The bacteria E. coli, later identified through blood cultures, entered her bloodstream on or around December 30th. By January 3rd, she had sepsis. Sepsis is the body's extreme response to infection. The immune system, instead of fighting the infection locally, launches a system-wide inflammatory cascade that damages the body's own organs. The Sepsis Alliance reports that approximately 1.7 million adults in the United States develop sepsis each year, and approximately 350,000 die from it. It is the leading cause of death in hospitals, more deadly than heart attacks, strokes, or any individual cancer. Margaret was placed in the ICU immediately. The medical team initiated the Surviving Sepsis Campaign protocol, a set of evidence-based treatment guidelines published by the Society of Critical Care Medicine. that includes early antibiotic administration, intravenous fluid resuscitation, and vasopressor support to maintain blood pressure. Margaret received all of these. She also received a central venous catheter, a line inserted into the subclavian vein beneath her right collarbone, for IV access and medication delivery, and a Swan Ganz catheter, a pulmonary artery catheter threaded through the right side of her heart to measure pulmonary artery pressure, cardiac output, and mixed venous oxygen saturation. These measurements tell the ICU team whether the heart is keeping up with the body's demands. Margaret's heart was not keeping up. The sepsis had triggered a condition called septic cardiomyopathy, a weakening of the heart muscle caused by the inflammatory chemicals flooding her bloodstream. Her ejection fraction, the percentage of blood the heart pumps out with each beat, normally 55–70%, dropped to 25%. Her kidneys were showing early signs of acute kidney injury, with creatinine levels rising from a baseline of 0.9 to 2, 4 mg/dl. Her lactate was 4.8 mol/L. Anything above 4 is classified as severe sepsis with a mortality rate exceeding 40%. This is the medical reality of what was happening to my wife while my son was at dinner. I called Derek at 9:47 p.m. I'd been at the hospital since 3 p.m. I'd spoken with the ICU attending, a pulmonologist named Dr. Anwar Hassan, who told me that the next 12 hours were critical. If Margaret responded to the antibiotics and fluid resuscitation, she had a chance. If her organs continued to decline, they would need to discuss comfort care. Comfort care, the medical term for stopping treatment and managing pain while the patient dies. The last station before the end. I called Derek because I needed my son. Not his money, not his car, not his real estate expertise. I needed him to sit in the chair next to mine and be present while his mother fought for her life. I needed him to hold her hand, even though she was sedated, because the nurses told me that ICU patients can sometimes hear familiar voices, and that the presence of family can affect outcomes in ways that medicine can't measure. I'm busy, Dad. I'll come in the morning. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I hung up and I sat in room 4012, bed A, and I held Margaret's hand and I listened to the ventilator breathe for her, the rhythmic hiss and click of a machine doing the work that her lungs couldn't do, and I waited. At 11 p.m., the hospital chaplain came. His name was David Mercer. He was a Methodist minister who served as the on-call spiritual care provider for Centaur RMH ICU, a service offered by most major hospitals for patients and families facing critical illness, regardless of religious affiliation. David sat with me. He didn't say much. Chaplains are trained in the ministry of presence, the theological concept that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for a person in crisis is simply be there. No advice. No scripture. No platitudes, just presence. At 1 a.m., David asked if there was anyone else he should call. My son. But he's busy. David looked at me. He'd been a hospital chaplain for 14 years. He'd seen every version of family response to ICU crisis. The families who drop everything and fill the waiting room, and the families who don't come at all. Would you like me to call him? No. He said he'd come in the morning. Mr. Beckett, I should mention, your wife's attorney visited her 3 weeks ago. Did she tell you about that? I sat up. Her attorney. Margaret doesn't have an attorney. She does. A woman named Patricia Givens. She came on December 15th. She was here for about 2 hours. Margaret was lucid at the time. This was before the sepsis worsened. The nursing staff noted the visit in Margaret's chart because Ms. Givens brought documents that Margaret signed. I was asked to witness one of the signatures. What documents? I don't know the details. But Ms. Givens left her card at the nurse's station. She said you or your family might need it. David handed me the card. Patricia Givens, attorney at law. Estate planning and elder law. Office on South Main Street in Harrisonburg. Margaret had hired an attorney 3 weeks before the sepsis. While she was in the hospital for the UTI, before the infection spread, before the ICU, before the ventilator. She'd used a window of lucidity and relative health to summon an attorney to her hospital bed and sign documents that I knew nothing about. I put the card in my pocket. I didn't call Patricia that night. I was holding Margaret's hand and watching the numbers on the monitor and counting ventilator breaths, 14 per minute. Each one a mechanical promise that my wife was still here. Margaret survived the night. At 6 a.m., Dr. Hassan reviewed her labs and told me that the antibiotics were beginning to work. The lactate had dropped from 4.8 to 3. 1. The creatinine was stabilizing, and the vasopressors were being weaned. She wasn't out of danger. But she was fighting. I called Derek at 6:15 a.m. He answered on the 4th ring. Dad, how is she? She's stable. The doctor says the next 24 hours will tell us more. When are you coming? I'm getting ready now. I'll be there by 8. He arrived at 80:40. He was wearing a suit. Not a hospital visit suit, a work suit. He'd come from his townhouse in Crozet, which is an hour from Harrisonburg, but he'd clearly gotten ready for the office first. Hair styled. Cologne. The Lexus parked in the visitor lot with the engine still ticking. He walked into room 412 and looked at Margaret on the ventilator, and his first words were not, "How is Mom?" or, "Is she going to be okay?" or, "I'm sorry I didn't come last night." His first words were, "Dad." The chaplain mentioned that Mom's attorney was here. "What's that about?" The chaplain. David Mercer. I realized later that David had called Derek that morning, not to discuss the attorney visit, but to inform him that his mother was in critical condition and that his father was alone at the hospital. It was a welfare check, the kind that chaplains make when they see a family member sitting alone in an ICU at Fun AM. David had mentioned the attorney visit in passing. As context for Margaret's recent hospital stay, Derek had latched onto the attorney the way a broker latches onto a listing. Not the sepsis. Not the ventilator. Not the woman on the bed, the attorney. "I don't know what documents she signed," I said. "The attorney's name is Patricia Givens. Have you called her?" "No, Derek. I've been sitting with your mother. In the ICU. Since 3 p.m. yesterday. While you were at dinner." He didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He said, "I'll call her." He stepped out of the room to make the call. He was gone for 22 minutes. 22 minutes in the hallway. On his phone, talking to his dying mother's attorney, while I sat beside his dying mother and watched the numbers on the monitor. When he came back, his face was different. Not concerned. Not grieving. Gray. The color of a man who's just learned something that changes his financial projections. "What did she say?" I asked. "She said the documents are confidential until Mom either recovers or doesn't. She said Mom gave specific instructions about when and how to disclose the contents." "What does that mean?" "It means Mom changed something, Dad. The will. The accounts. Something. And she didn't tell us." "She didn't tell you," I said. "Maybe she told me and I wasn't listening. Or maybe she didn't tell either of us because she had her reasons." Margaret always has her reasons. Derek stayed for 3 hours. He sat in the chair. He looked at his phone. He did not hold his mother's hand. He did not speak to her. He did not ask the nurses about her condition. At 11:45, he said he had a meeting at 1, and he left. 3 hours. His mother was on a ventilator fighting sepsis, and he gave her 3 hours between phone calls to her attorney. Margaret spent 9 days in the ICU. I was there for every one of them. Every morning at 7 a.m. Every night until the nurses told me to go home and rest. I learned the language of the ICU the way I'd learned the language of woodworking, through immersion. I learned what the ventilator settings meant. I learned what the vasopressor drip rates indicated. I learned to read the arterial blood gas results that the respiratory therapist printed every 4 hours. I learned that a lactate below 2 was good and above 4 was dangerous, and that the space between those numbers was where my wife lived for 9 days. Derek visited 3 times during the 9 days. 3 visits. Average duration, 2 hours and 40 minutes. Total time at his mother's bedside 8 hours and 9 days. Every visit began with a question about the attorney. Every visit ended with a reason to leave. Margaret was extubated, removed from the ventilator, on day 7. She breathed on her own. Her voice was raw from the tube, but her mind was sharp. The first thing she said to me was, "Did Derek come?" 3 times. "How long?" "Not long enough." She closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet but steady, the eyes of a woman who'd already made her decision and was watching it validate itself. "I changed the will. Arthur, I know. The chaplain told me about Patricia. I changed it on December 15th. I was lucid. Dr. Hassan confirmed my capacity in a bedside assessment. He documented it in my medical chart. Patricia brought the documents. David Mercer witnessed my signature. Everything was done properly, in accordance with Virginia Code Section 64(2403), which governs the execution of wills. What did you change? Margaret looked at me with the expression I'd seen for 35 years, the expression of a woman who makes decisions the way she monitors vital signs with data, with precision, and without sentimentality. I created a charitable remainder trust, the Margaret Ann Beckett Education Trust. The house goes to you outright, no conditions. Your pension and Social Security are yours. The life insurance pays to you as the named beneficiary, but the investment accounts, the $4 million in retirement funds, go into the trust upon my death. A charitable trust. A charitable remainder unitrust specifically governed by Internal Revenue Code Sections 6 and 64. The trust pays you a fixed percentage of the trust's value annually, 5%, for the remainder of your life. That's approximately $70,000 per year. When you die, the remaining principal goes to the Centaur RMH Foundation to fund nursing scholarships. Nursing scholarships. I was a nurse for 28 years. The hospital saved my life. The nurses who trained me made me who I am. That money will train the next generation. That's what I want it to do. And Derek. Margaret paused. The pause of a mother about to say something about her child that she's been holding for years. Derek receives $1. $1. The legal minimum under Virginia probate law to demonstrate that the testator, the person writing the will, did not accidentally omit the hair. A wondered bequest is a deliberate exclusion. It tells the court I remembered this person. I chose to leave them almost nothing. This was not an oversight. This was a decision. The will includes a no contest clause. Margaret continued. Virginia Code Section 64(2517), the interim provision. If Derek challenges the will, he forfeits the $1 and receives nothing. The clause is enforceable in Virginia courts as long as the challenge is found to be without probable cause. Margaret. He's our son. He's our son who said I'm busy while I was on a ventilator. He's our son who visited 3 times in 9 days. He's our son who called my attorney before he called my nurse. He's our son who took $40,000 from us in 1 year and never repaid $1. He's our son Arthur. But he is not our heir. He'll be devastated. He'll be inconvenienced. There's a difference. Devastation is what I felt when he didn't come. Inconvenience is what he'll feel when the money doesn't come. Those are not the same emotion, and I refuse to reward the second one. I sat with that. It was hard. Not because Margaret was wrong. Because Margaret was right. And the rightness of it was the most painful thing I'd experienced since the ventilator. Margaret was discharged from the hospital on January 14th. She came home to the house on Garber's Church Road. The house I'd built a wheelchair ramp for. The house where I'd moved the bedroom to the ground floor so she wouldn't have to climb stairs. The house that was now legally mine, free and clear, thanks to a will amendment signed in a hospital bed by a woman who'd spent 28 years caring for other people's hearts and finally had to protect her own. Derek didn't visit after the discharge. Not once. He called twice in the first week, both times asking about the situation with the will. Not about Margaret's recovery. Not about her breathing. Not about whether she could walk to the bathroom unassisted or whether she was eating solid food again. The will. The documents. The money. I told him to come home and talk to his mother. I'll come this weekend. He didn't come that weekend. Or the next. Margaret died on March 2nd, 2025. Not from the sepsis. She'd beaten that. She died from a pulmonary embolism. A blood clot that traveled from her deep leg veins to her lungs and blocked the pulmonary artery. Pulmonary embolism is a known complication of prolonged hospitalization and immobility. The American Heart Association estimates that PE occurs in approximately 1 in 1,000 hospitalized patients, and that it is the third leading cause of hospital-related death in the United States. She died at home, in the ground floor bedroom. At 40:20 a.m., I was holding her hand. The oxygen concentrator was humming beside the bed. The night was quiet except for the machine and her breathing, and then the absence of her breathing. She was 65 years old. She'd survived sepsis. She'd survived the ICU. She'd survived the ventilator and the central line and the Swan, Gans catheter and the 9 days of organ failure. And a blood clot killed her in her sleep. I called Derek at 40:35 a.m. Derek, your mother died? Silence. Then, when? 15 minutes ago. I'll come today. He arrived at 10 a.m., 5.5 hours after I called. An hour drive from Crozet. He'd taken time to shower, to dress, to prepare. For what, I don't know. His mother was already at the funeral home by the time he walked through the door. He stood in the living room. He looked at the ground floor bedroom where Margaret had died. He looked at the wheelchair ramp I'd built. He looked at the oxygen concentrator that was still plugged in, still humming, still doing its job for a patient who no longer needed it. Then he said, "Dad, I need to talk about the estate." The estate. His mother had been dead for 5 hours. The bed was still warm. The oxygen concentrator was still running. And Derek wanted to talk about the estate. "Not today, Derek." "Dad, Patricia Givens called me. She said there's a reading scheduled for next week. She said I should be prepared." "Prepared for what?" She wouldn't say, but she said prepared. That's not a word lawyers use when everything is normal. I turned off the oxygen concentrator. The hum stopped. The house was silent for the first time in weeks. The particular silence of a home where a machine has been running for so long that you forget it's on until it's off. "Your mother changed her will, Derek. You know that. She changed it while she was in the hospital. Before the sepsis, she was lucid. Her capacity was documented. Patricia oversaw the signing. The chaplain witnessed it." "What did she change?" "Come to the reading. You'll find out. Dad, come to the reading, Derek. And bring the patients you couldn't find when she was alive." The reading was on March 10th, 2025. Patricia Givens' office on South Main Street. A small conference room with a round table and 3 chairs. Patricia, me, and Derek. Patricia read the will. The house to Arthur, outright. The life insurance to Arthur, as named beneficiary. The retirement accounts to the Margaret Ann Beckett Education Trust, a charitable remainder unitrust providing 5% annual distributions to Arthur for life, with the remainder to the Centara RMH Foundation for nursing scholarships. Derek's bequest to one bulls. Patricia read the specific language. "To my son, Derek Allen Beckett, I leave the sum of $1. This bequest is made deliberately and with full knowledge of its effect. I love my son, but love does not obligate me to fund a life that cannot find time for mine." The room was silent. Derek stared at the document. His face went through 3 stages: confusion, disbelief, and then the particular shade of anger that arrives when a person realizes they've been outmaneuvered by someone they underestimated. "She can't do this." "She can," Patricia said. Margaret had full testamentary capacity. Dr. Hassan's bedside assessment is documented in her medical record. The will was executed in compliance with Virginia Code Section 64(2)(4)(3). 2 witnesses. Proper attestation, no undue influence. I'll contest it. The will contains an interim clause under Virginia Code Section 64(2)(5)(17). If you contest and the court finds your challenge to be without probable cause, you forfeit the ones of bequest. You would receive nothing. This is Dad. Did you know about this? I found out in the ICU. While you were at dinner. I was at a work. You were busy. I know, your mother knew too. She'd been keeping a ledger for 2 years. Every missed call. Every declined visit. Every request for money. 11 calls in 2024, Derek. 7 of them asking for money. 3 hospital visits in 9 days. 2 hours and 40 minutes average. She wrote it all down. A ledger. Mom kept a ledger on me. She kept a ledger on you the way she kept track of her patient's vitals. Not out of cruelty. Out of observation, she saw the pattern. She documented it. And she acted on it. Patricia opened a second folder. The ledger. Margaret had given it to Patricia during the December 15th visit. The same visit where she'd signed the will amendment. The ledger was now part of the estate file. Attached to the will as a supporting document that demonstrated the reasoning behind the $1 bequest. Derek read the ledger. Every page, every entry. Every date, every missed call, every dollar requested, every excuse recorded in Margaret's handwriting. The small, precise script of a cardiac nurse who'd spent 28 years documenting patient data. The last entry was dated January 3, 2025. The night of the ICU. Margaret had written it sometime before the sepsis worsened, possibly during the hours between admission and intubation, when she was still alert enough to hold a pen. 9:47 p.m. Called Derek. Arthur called, told him I'm in the ICU. Sepsis. Critical, Derek said. I'm busy, Dad. Did not come. She documented it. from her hospital bed, while her organs were failing. She'd picked up the composition notebook and written down the exact time, the exact words, and the exact failure. Not out of spite. Out of the habit of a woman who believed that documentation is the difference between a feeling and a fact. Derek closed the ledger. He sat for a long time. Patricia and I waited. She was watching me the whole time, he said. She was a nurse, Derek. Watching is what nurses do. I didn't know she was keeping track. You didn't know because you weren't paying attention. Your mother was in the ICU and you asked about her attorney. She was on a ventilator and you stayed for 3 hours. She came home from the hospital and you didn't visit. She died at 4:20 a.m. and you arrived at 10. An hour drive. You took 4.5 hours to get ready to see your dead mother. I was busy. I know. Derek didn't contest the will. His attorney, a litigator in Charlottesville who charged $400 an hour, reviewed the documents and advised against it. The testamentary capacity assessment was bulletproof. The will execution was flawless. The ledger provided clear, documented justification for the bequest. And the interim clause meant that a failed challenge would cost Derek even the symbolic one that Margaret had left him. He received his $1. Patricia mailed it. A check for $100 from the estate of Margaret Ann Beckett. Derek never cashed it. The Margaret Ann Beckett Education Trust was funded 3 months after her death. The $4 million in retirement accounts were rolled into the trust structure under the guidance of a fiduciary advisor, certified by the Certified Financial Planner Board of Standards. The trust's first annual distribution to me, approximately $70,000, arrived in July. I used $4,000 of it to build new bookshelves in Margaret's room. White oak, dovetail joints. The kind of work I taught for 34 years. The kind of work Margaret would have appreciated because it was precise and it was patient and it was built to last. The first nursing scholarship was awarded in September 2025. A 22-year-old woman named Brianna Lopez. First-generation college student. She'd been working as a nursing assistant at Centaur RMH while attending James Madison University. Margaret would have loved her, the work ethic, the determination, the hands that could start an IV blindfolded the way Margaret could. Brianna sent me a thank you card. I keep it on the refrigerator, next to Margaret's last grocery list, next to the photograph of Margaret in her nursing uniform at Centaura. Derek and I don't speak often. He calls. Not every Sunday, but more than before. The calls are different now. He doesn't ask for money. He asks about the house, about the scholarship, about his mother. He called last month and said something that I've been turning over in my head ever since. Dad, I missed it. All of it. And I can't get it back. No, you can't. Is there anything I can do? You can visit Derek. Not the estate. Not the accounts. Not the attorney, your mother's grave. Garber's Church Road. Whenever you want. The door is open. It always was. He came that Saturday. He stood at Margaret's grave for 45 minutes. He didn't bring flowers. He brought a composition notebook, the same brand Margaret used for the ledger. He sat on the bench beside the headstone, and he wrote something. He didn't show me what. I didn't ask. I think he's starting his own ledger. Not of missed calls and failed visits. Of the things he's going to do differently. The calls he'll make. The time he'll give. The presents he'll offer. Margaret would have documented that too. She would have opened the composition notebook and written the date. And the time and the observation. Derek came. Stayed 45 minutes. Brought a notebook. Didn't ask about money. And in the margin, she would have written, progress. If this story touched you, leave a comment. Tell me what you'd do if your only son said, I'm busy, while your wife was in the ICU. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about family truth and the mothers who keep ledgers on the people they love. Before we close, this story, like all stories on this channel, contains fictional elements crafted for entertainment and educational purposes. If this type of content isn't for you, that's completely okay. Take care of yourselves. But if you stayed until the end, thank you. Margaret would have liked you. She always appreciated people who stayed until the end. The patients who fought. The students who finished. The family who showed up, show up. That's all she ever wanted. Show up.